It's so wild that you mentioned the fear of rejection. Like, you're going to ask someone out and it's like literally in a private setting where there's only two of you in the room. And then you go to the gym. I think it was yesterday, the first quote, Andrew Hicks, the greatest thing. Yeah, yesterday, the greatest thing you can give yourself is freedom from what others think. And it's like, but that's so hard. Even someone who studies quotes. I mean, I've posted, I think I'm up to like 1,300 like unique quotes over the past almost 500 days. And I'm running in the woods recording like a TikTok or whatever video. And if I see two people talking, I'll like turn around and go the other way.
I know, it's so interesting. I don't understand why. I have moments where like I have blinders on and I don't care, which I find interesting. And I think it's when I get to my low points where I've just had, like I had one just recently yesterday where I'm just like, I was just telling you before we recorded, everything's good in your life and it's like you're focusing on the things that you don't have, which is like not a good thing to do, obviously. You have all these things that are going for you and you've dreamed of having and being in this present moment, and then you're like, you still don't have the one thing and you're focused so much on that. And it's like you just put everything else to waste that's really kind of set and situated in your life. So for instance, going back to my point, like yesterday, I get to like a lower point in my mood and I'm like, you know what, I just don't care anymore. And I think that's when the whole fear of like being judged and your ego being hurt by other individuals like doesn't matter so much, because you're kind of just like, I'm gonna just do this. Like, what else am I gonna do? You know what I mean? I'm not gonna stay in this mood forever. I wanna get out of this and be in like a higher mind state, so to speak.
Sure. Chris Williamson, he had something, he talked about a research study where it was the idea along those lines of you'd rather have situations in life be, you're better off being worse off than you are being just slightly off. Whereas if everything's like, it's okay, I'm getting by, it's not bad enough to warrant you triggering action. Like you're rarely going to get to the point in that situation where you're just okay, where you say, you know what, I've had it. Like this life I can't stand it anymore, because it's like, yeah, it's an okay life, right? But if it's really far off, and you get to those random low points, or you have stuff that randomly happens, like, oh my gosh, like I blew out the tire in my car, this happened. It's like, that's it. I've had it. Like you're better off being in those situations statistically, because they're more likely to prompt you making dramatic changes, which is a fascinating concept. But no, along those lines, part of what my thought process was as you were getting into, like, hey, I'm in these different scenarios. There's times where I'm up, I'm down, fear of rejection, then I get to a different point. So my brain went to, is that an adaptive skill, right? You have like, I'm editing this one textbook and it's like, innate immunity and adaptive immunity. Like, is that an adaptive? I think it's more of an innate perspective, or it's an innate attribute for us to want to be more reserved, to not stand out from like not even the hunter-gatherer, but from like the caveman, barbarian perspective. Like you don't want to stand out in the crowd because that's the one who gets picked on, right? By the lion and the bear or something like that. Like there's probably a prehistoric nature to that, an innate nature, but is it trainable? And if it is, what's the scenario? Like what would that look like? Where I think you get into like psychologists and stuff like that, and it's like exposure therapy, stuff like that, where it's like, oh, I have a fear of elevators. And it's like, okay, well, let's like draw an elevator. Let's watch a video of someone getting on the elevator. Let's watch a video of someone being in the elevator. Like, hey, go stand near like that continual exposure. So it's like if the main fear is fear of judgment from others, is there an aspect where we constantly just have you, even if it's either strangers or friends, people judge you. Like there's this, there's that. I don't know. There's a lot of fascinating things I've watched along those lines. I can't remember the name of this guy, but he did a thing where he said, all right, like it was along this concept. And he had someone in the front row and he said, you know what? Everyone, tell that woman you hate her purple hair. Like, your purple hair sucks. It's the worst purple hair. Like, I can't believe you would dye your hair purple. And everyone like starts saying stuff like that. And he's like, well, what's the moral of the story? How do you feel? And she's like, I don't have purple hair. He's like, exactly. So he's like, but now if then you can slowly build to something that you do have where you get comfortable with it and things like that. I think it was Salma Hayek. She did a thing. Everyone knows Salma Hayek, the actress. She said, okay, if I say something to you in Spanish, I could like rip into you and rip you a new one, like truly say something horrible. But if you don't understand the language, it's going to just roll right off you. But then I could say something, this is where you then get into the opposite, where it's like, I then say something in your own language that I didn't even mean as something negative, but then you take it as negative, and now it ruins your entire day. So how do you go from like the total polar opposite? Somebody's actually insulting you, but since you don't understand what they're trying to say, you don't take it to heart whatsoever. And then the opposite is someone says something and they're actually trying to compliment you, and you take it like extremely in the wrong way and allow it to like ruin your day and things like that. Fascinating stuff.
It's like the point from Ryan Holiday talks about that too, of you are the one who allows like what people say to have meaning. Right? So it's like whatever someone says to you, you can control like how it intercepts like your internal psyche. Like, is this going to hurt me or is it not going to hurt me? But that's hard to do though, because a lot of that is learned off of probably parental figures, but also like friends and people that you associate yourself with, and how you talk to yourself, right?
Yeah, I think of the word acceptance. It's like we want, and it makes sense. Why wouldn't you want to be accepted? Like, I want to be accepted. So if you're saying something that I don't like think is accepting, I'm gonna like take it to heart, and it's gonna ruin things like that. And I think that gets it like Stoicism. Epictetus or Seneca, it's their main line was, it's not the result of what happened to you, it's the meaning in which you ascribe to it. Which, and then you get into Eleanor Roosevelt, where it's like, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. Never give it. Which it's like, that for me, I think that's one of the most humbling, sobering, difficult things in the world to do. To take ownership and responsibility of, if you're hurting my feelings, granted, I don't want someone who like, I don't want to live in a world, not in a world, but I don't want to have a relationship with someone who's just constantly like bombarding me with insults. But in general, it's like, oh, I got offended over this, I got offended over that. And it's like, can you believe this? And it's like, why is that bothering you? Or for what reason is that bothering you? How come that's bothering you? If you read the book Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, The Art of Negotiation, I've learned to not use the word why, because people get very defensive. Like, Tyler, why would you do that? Instead of, hey, what made you do that? Or how come you did something like that? It takes it away from you. It's such a fascinating. If I could recommend one book that you must read, Art of Negotiation by Chris Voss. It's one of the most powerful books that I've ever read. I've read it 3 times now.
I think the why, almost in terms of what I feel like internally when you say that, makes me feel like you're being judged. Like, it's you're questioning the integrity of what led you to that decision.
Right, but if I say what's the reason that happened?
Yeah, it's a different.
I'm not addressing you. I'm addressing the thing.
The situation.
Hey, what happened to which you and that thing just happened to align? It's such a fascinating concept. It's such a fascinating book. Now, that makes me think of Jim Rohn and Zig Ziglar. Zig Ziglar is like the one who got me into personal development, growth and motivational stuff. Jim Rohn has a similar, where it's like repetition, repetition, repetition. Repetition is the mother of learning. Repetition is the mother of skill. And it's like, I think of those scenarios kind of, you just have to trial and error it. Which, if I can, although I'm already taking over, if I can interject and say, well, hey, we're at this point. The idea of repetition, which is one of the reasons why we were coming up with, hey, what do we want to do today? And it's like, welcome back, everybody. We have taken a hiatus. It makes me think of the idea of repetition. And I think you have it a little bit more than me, although I also have it, which it's, how can we set things up to be the best podcast possible. Hey, how can we align? What are the talking points so we can make it like the best conversation ever? And what ends up happening is, you know, we keep saying we want the conditions to be right, and then we ended up just, I don't know, it's been a long time since we've done a podcast. So we were like, let's just start recording, because our conversations, half of our conversations we always say, which just tends to be a lot of my conversations lately, student meetings, faculty, like fellow meetings. God, I wish I recorded that just so I can reflect on it and things like that. But it's good to be back, man.
It is very good to be back. Yeah, that was the main topic. I have some notes here, but just in terms of us being more consistent and not worrying so much about like if we have a specific topic to focus on, or if we have a guest, or how long it has to be or how short it has to be, but just showing up and repeatedly putting something out that can be valuable to people. So we tend to have a conversation, and I always talk to Patrick as a mentor too, for the most part in my life, because he's led me in a lot of great directions and always has very good words of wisdom to give me from his life experience. But it's hard sometimes. We start to talk and we don't record. So back to your point about like with students and with colleagues and with family and friends, I think it's important to really capture those things, not just only for value to other people, but also like memories to keep yourself on track, and for us too to kind of realize like what we've already put out and all the great people we've had on and conversations we've had, but also for what's to come, and to hold ourselves accountable to continually improving and getting better. So,
and I think the only way to do that is to attempt, like just continually attempt, right? If you want to jump higher, if you never jump, you never practice jumping, you're never going to do it. If you want to get faster, but you never practice running fast, like it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, there's a saying, and I'm reading Relentless by Tim Grover. I have it right here, actually. I'm trying to finish it.
Unreal book.
It says, I forget who, you'll probably know the quote, but you miss the 100 of the shots that you never take.
Yeah, That's a Wayne Gretzky. You miss 100% of the shots that you never take. And it's so true. Now, you know what's crazy about that? Getting on this apprehension, right? This fear. There's a good line. If you ever saw the movie The Mighty Ducks with Emilio Estevez, it's an awesome movie. It was like a cult classic. But he was this high school or like travel team famous like hockey player, and he was in the game-winning championship or something like that, and he took this game-winning shot, or it was a penalty shot, whatever, and it hit the net. It hit the pole of the net and bounced out. And his whole life, he was coaching and all that stuff. His whole life, he was just so worried, because he's like, gosh, if it just went a quarter of an inch to the one other direction, it would have gone in. And he was talking to like this 12-year-old or something, Charlie. And Charlie's like, yeah, but if you hit it a quarter of an inch in the other direction, you would have missed the net entirely. He's like, gosh, Charlie, I never thought about it like that and stuff like that. And it's like, it's perspective. So I think a big part of it is just putting things into perspective, which, but practice anyway is the main one. But if you didn't shoot, well, which I think gets along the lines of like that fear of failure, which is right. Doubt kills more dreams than failure ever could, is like a good line. So it's like, I mean, we're trying to steal away time, and it's like, well, I'm trying to carve away an hour or stuff like that. And it's like, why does it have to be that, like that long of a time period? Like, just talk. Whatever happens, carve it away.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be so like perfect. We're human. We make mistakes. I think when we first started, we wanted to make this more on me. Like, I wanted it to be this kind of professional production, which of course we're always going to strive for. But I think the authentic conversation and just showing that you and I have our flaws and have our thoughts, and we kind of riff back and forth, like you were saying, is something that more people can resonate with than like a production kind of podcast that everyone else is doing already. So that will make us different by just being real and, having this sort of one-on-one conversation with one another. But I like the fear concept. I'm going to go back to my notes because I wrote a lot down this morning. And one of the things was that you were just talking about like perspective, and I had written down on the other side of a fearful calculated risk, which I think is something that's important. It's not something that's going to paralyze you if it doesn't go in your favor, but that the integrity of doing something your subconscious mind thinks isn't possible feels so good after it's completed. This is where I feel very motivated, following a fearful task being accomplished or at least completed, to do something I say I want to do that others aren't willing to do. So I've heard that a couple times on my social media reels as well, where it's like
Which part?
the
Because that's a
the
lot of
fact of
there's a lot in that.
the fact of others not being willing to do it in the first place, but then you're so, and this is me, not even I'm saying this for myself. This is how I feel internally. I'm so worried about what others think, which is why I'm not willing to take the risk of leaning into doing whatever that is. But when I attach that like thought process of, well, hey, others aren't even willing to do it, like back to your scenario with the goal, like others aren't even going to be willing to put themselves in the position of like taking a game winning goal shot and have all that pressure on them or whatever. Like go back to we were talking about like talking to girls before, talking to a woman in public versus talking to a woman in private. Most people aren't going to do that in either scenario. So why are you worried about what those people think and what they'll judge you based on what the outcome is? And I think for me, when I think of it that way, it's like, wow, like that makes me feel like there's less risk attached to it. Now I would be more willing to do that because I am already willing to put myself in a position that people aren't willing to put themselves in. You know what I mean? So if it doesn't even play out to how I want it to, at least I was willing to put myself in that situation. So if people can like break down things like that in terms of, and that can be anything in life, whatever you want to do. If you want to go to the gym, like New Year's has come around, we always talk about how people are wanting to get healthier and want to join a gym or want to, start thinking about what they're eating, not associating so much about what people are going to judge you for about by doing that, but think about most people aren't going to be willing to even do that in the first place. So that kind of gives you a little bit of like integrity and motivation, so to speak, to get going with it because you're willing to do something that other people aren't, and that you should pride yourself for that. Like that's something that should make you prideful inside.
Yeah, I think there's a big aspect, but I think the reason there is that apprehension is because you would, by standing apart, you're then viewed differently. So it's again that feeling of belonging, feeling of acceptance. I think it's to not have that or to be worried, and this is where it's. There's a quote I used the other day, and it's I think it was also yesterday, and it had to do with you might as well do it because it had to do with like being judged. And the idea was, it was Eleanor Roosevelt. She's got so many. Do what you feel in your heart to be right, for you'll be criticized anyway. It's like people are going to judge you no matter what. Like it's funny. You know what's crazy? I used to think it's crazy because I was raised Catholic, all this stuff. I used to think like judgment, thou shalt not judge, was like a commandment. And you hear all of this idea about judgment. And I always struggle with that. I struggle with a lot of random thoughts just because I am a deep thinker. But the more I think about it, it's like judgment is life. Like if I want to be able to walk down the stairs, I have to judge the depth of the steps. I have to judge where am I going to hit my head. I have to judge where my center of gravity, like all those things. So there's an aspect of judgment that like is required in life. It's kind of along the lines of Jim Rohn always said, people are so against like selfishness, and he calls it enlightened self-interest. So it's like, again, part of it's your intent, things like that. But I think that's one of the most if I had to say like two things that I could take away from most of what I've read in the past 5 years, like care less about what others think, care more about what you think more of yourself, and just be consistent. So we were talking like that idea of the more consistently you try something, it's the only way you're going to learn. It's the only way you're going to be able to adapt, right? You can't adapt if you don't take an assessment of your surroundings. And one of the easiest ways to assess what's going on is to just like venture out and try something. So it's like, hey, I'm going to go talk to this random, stranger because there's something that's resonating with them that's like attracting me towards them. Let me go see what it's all about. That's one thing that you obviously had. I was, as a college professor, just in general, I got that from my dad, I believe. The running joke was back in the day, I'm 40, I just turned 43 last week. We would go to the mall and it's like, hey, we're all going to meet in the food court. And then everyone, the running joke, like you'd come back, and my dad would always like go somewhere, audio, video stuff, whatever, and then like come back to the food court early. And he's always seen like with someone else at the table, and he's just carrying on like a long conversation with perfect strangers. It's like, and I got that from him. Like you could put me anywhere, and I'm gonna try and strike up a conversation with someone because we can always resonate with. There's always some commonality. There's many commonalities with human beings. It's just a matter of, are you willing to find them and stuff like that. Anyway, I got off on a tangent.
I don't think there's an abundance of people like that now. I think like you have to be the one, right? I think that's something I've been trying to do more for myself too. Like for what you just said, like you go into another situation of a group of people at like, let's say like a holiday party or something, and you know like 4 out of the 5 people, and there's one new person there, and they know the other 4 people. Neither of you know each other, and they don't introduce themselves. Maybe it's for whatever reason they're shy, or they just don't have an interest in meeting new people, whatever it is. I've been trying to put more on myself to be the person that breaks the ice and says, hey, nice to meet you. I'm so and so. How do you know these people? And just have a conversation to make everyone kind of feel like they're a part of that group, and it's not like there's any kind of energy there where you don't know one another and it feels a little bit strange. But I think that's a powerful skill to have, to be sociable in any setting. It's something that I really want to improve on myself. I think it like for relationships, for you don't know where that could lead to, for in terms of work and employment. Like it's always good to know people. It's always, you never know who you're going to meet. You never know where
that's the big one. And it's crazy how strong networking, like I tell my students all the time, like networking. You never know who you're going to meet. You never know what opportunities exist. But what you just talked about makes me think of? Curious. That's like a common word that's popping up a lot in the keywords of like my daily inspirational post text, things like that, is curiosity. There's like a good line. It's like, be less judgmental and more curious. Instead of, oh my gosh, like, that person did this because they're blank, and you're putting like a label on them. It's, I wonder like how come that person did that? Like what led that person to behave in that way, think that way, dress that way, talk that way, etc. So it's like, just be a more curious individual, right? That's an Einstein quote. The whole point is to never stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing. And it's like, again, that's, if you want to get better, you have to attempt stuff. Well, right. What should I attempt? Well, are you curious? Like, what is it that you're interested in doing? I'm finding that's more, my favorite thing about my job as a professor is just the conversations with students. Just like, what is it that you want to do? So like, you're a physical therapist. I'm, exercise physiologist. I teach, nutrition, things like that, mindset. But I have a lot of pre-PT students, and it's like, do you want to be a PT, or do you want to do the things PTs do? So it's like, what type of relationship do you want? How many friends do you want? So I'm like, hey, when we plan your future, the PT is just a title. When you become a licensed PT, that licensure is meaningless, because everyone else applying for that job is also a licensed PT. It's not the diploma, it's who's holding it. So it's like, what type of person do you want to be holding that diploma? What type of person, do you want driving the car, going out to dinner, like when you're in a social setting? How do you want to be?
That's so powerful. You say that though. You're the guy you always refer to. Slipping my name right now. Your favorite
Jim Rohn.
Jim Rohn.
Yeah.
He talks about that though. There's one famous one where he says like, if I asked you who you were, I think it was him. And a lot of people would say, like, I'm a physical therapist or I'm an exercise physiologist. But no, who are you really?
Oh, that's
you're not
Bob
your
Proctor.
Name. Yeah, you're not your name. You're not, like, and then it gets into the whole meaning of, like, who are you as really, like, as a person? Like, what do you want to live for? Like, what do you want your legacy to leave in people? Like, how did you make people feel when you talk to them? Like, that's so powerful, because I see that with, like, a lot of people that I interact with, too. They're just, whatever their job title is, and that's kind of, like, their whole life gets so consumed with it. And I think that's what kind of has, like, led me to really like why we've talked about today, like our hiatus and our rut, is like you get stuck in like this mundane routine and you're on autopilot, and it's like there's so much more to life than just getting up, like doing your normal routine to get out the door, go to work. Maybe you exercise during the week if you're lucky enough to be able to do that, then you come home, you repeat, the weekends you maybe have a little free time to see friends, family, whatever. And I'm not the kind of guy who's been going away and seeing things and traveling and have like families that do a whole lot together all the time. So I have a very like tight, strict routine, and I think for anybody it gets to the point where it's just like you get lost in it. You don't really know like why am I doing this, right? Like what's the purpose of life? And I think that's just like it's. I think more people need to think about that and spend time on that, and really, myself included. Like, who are you as a person? Really, who are you? What are your values? Like we always talk about on our podcast here. It's very, very, very important.
Yeah, it's like 11 minutes, and I just listened to the whole podcast. Bill Beswick is a famous sports psychologist from the UK, and he had this thing that he talks about with athletes, and he's like, I ask him three questions. What do you want? Nothing else matters if you don't know what you want, right? There's the famous like quotes that it's like, if one does not know, I think it's Seneca, if one does not know to which port one is sailing, no wind is favorable. It's like you're just going to drift along. So his big thing is, what is it that you want? Like you have to find out and figure out what you want, which is like goal setting and things like that. And then the second one is, how bad do you want it? I think that's my favorite thing to say, because again, besides what we were talking about earlier, like the idea, the humbling concept that my interpretation of what someone else is saying or doing or maybe thinking is really my own, like it's my own fault if I'm thinking only negatively. But I think the other one, how bad do you want it, is, like my wife is Polish. I started learning Polish. I'd love to also know Spanish. My brother-in-law is from Chile. A lot of people that I'm around are like, they speak Spanish. So it's like, how bad do I want to learn Spanish? If I wanted to know Spanish, like I have the capabilities and the mental capacity to learn Spanish. How bad do you want it? I don't want it bad enough for me to actually learn it. Why? I don't need you to tell me why, because I don't know it, right? How bad do you want, to learn piano? How bad do you want to like have a friend or to be a better person, or to, go to the gym, to stop eating cookies, to stop buying Starbucks, to save money? It's such a powerful statement that, those are the things you have to know. That what do I want? But it's such a powerful follow-up of, how bad do you want it? And for me, I think and then his third one is, how much are you willing to suffer? That then goes in. It's such a powerful three questions that he asks athletes, because he talks about like there's three different types of athletes. There's the athletes who are going to train to be better. Then there are the athletes that are going to train and all they want to do is win. And then there's the rare athlete. They're going to train every minute of every day because they want to dominate. And those are like, I think he's big in like soccer and stuff like that. So it's like, you look at Ronaldo, you look at Messi, right? You look at the Kobe Bryants, the Michael Jordans, like you look at David Goggins, like these are individuals who are in that top tier. But it's the same question regardless of what it is. If someone just had triple bypass surgery, like sedentary, obese, hypertension, hyperlipidemia, type 2 diabetes, whatever it is, it's the same question. What is it that you want? What you want is just a different magnitude than someone else. Well, I want to be healthier, right? I want to be more fulfilled. I want to have better relationships, right? I want to make more money, right? I want to blah, blah, blah. Okay, how bad do you want it? You have to identify it, and then how bad do you want it? The how bad do you want it is going to be dictated with, well, like James Clear, we don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems, which then gets back to this idea of, you have to set yourself up, right? You can only change in two ways, your mindset or your environment. And your environment is physical environment and social environment, right? If I live above a gym and I have to like cut through the gym to get to my apartment, I'm more likely to like eventually go to the gym, as opposed to there's no gym anywhere, which is where you get into like low socioeconomic food and stuff like that. They have like food deserts where it's like, yeah, we have very little access to affordable, healthy food. It's a food desert. You're less likely to eat healthy food if you don't have access to it and you can't afford it, stuff like that. So that makes me think of Zig Ziglar, which then his big thing is, if you don't, what is it that you want? How bad do you want it? And his big thing is, well, what am I getting? If you keep doing what you've been doing, you're going to keep getting what you've been getting. He's like, if you don't like the output, you got to change the input, which for me is conversations like this. For me is reading different different quotes, listening to YouTube videos, like motivational videos, listening to podcasts, going and like seeing speakers, buying books, reading books. Like that's why I do my daily newsletter. It's like the one rock for me every day. I've been doing it for almost 500 days now. And I don't know. Thoughts?
Well, I had written down two before because I was just thinking in my head, we focus so much on like how bad do you want it, you know, well, what do you want? How bad do you want it, and how much are you willing to suffer? But then you were just making the point about like food deserts and people that like socioeconomic locations won't have the ability to get to a gym or supermarket and things like that. So I had written that down on here too about being grateful for what you have in your life versus I don't know if we hit record when I was saying that I focus so much on what I don't have, and in reality, if I step back like 5 years even and think about what I do have right now in this present moment, it was stuff that I dreamed of. So where is the line? And this may be like a question that you can answer or just for our audience to even think about, where I have enough and I need to be grateful versus I don't have enough, or maybe I don't have enough of what I want and I need to have a little bit of motivation, or I need to have a little bit of suffering to endure to get to that point. So like where's the line of that, right? Because for instance, I wrote down on here that I have a roof over my head, right? I have a bed to sleep in. On top of I have comfortable blankets and pillows, right? And I have the financial freedom to lay in my bed, wake up on a Sunday, do a podcast with you, be able to be bored and be able to be in a rut in life and not have stress, to be able to relax and feel like I need to be doing something. Like where is the line in between being grateful and wanting more, right? Because, and I think that's probably very individual based for people, like you were saying before, based on what they have in their life, where they live, how they're raised, their familia. But I just think it's something interesting to think about, because like you can always want more, right? Like people talk about that, like when is enough enough? Is it experiences in life? Is it finances? Is it things, materialistic things? Is it? So I think that's something interesting that not a lot of people talk about and think about. And a lot of these people that we listen to, they're always talking about do this, do that to have more. But like, when is more enough? You know, and maybe it's personal development versus like materialisticness and experiences in life. Like maybe they're just two different things to think about. And like, you should always want to be better, because better is not your best, like we talk about.
Yeah.
Whereas like things in life, if you have the core like criteria that you need to function as a human, that's enough.
Yeah, it's now the interesting part is, where does the line exist? I don't know. Jim Rohn and Bob Proctor. Bob Proctor is very big on this. His big line along that is be happy with what you got, but be dissatisfied with it. Because dissatisfaction is a creative state. So it's like, be thankful for what you have. Like Jim Rohn says, be thankful for what you have while in pursuit of what you want. So it's like the constant, and this is like a big thing. You look at like billionaires, and it's like, look at most billionaires, they don't stop working. Because it's not what you get, it's like what you become in the pursuit of that which you are continually trying to get. Which is always, more and more and more. Now, this is where it can shift. Like you look at Kobe Bryant, and I just always use him as an example. He's such a great example. He realized I have enough of basketball, and then he shifted, and then he started pivoting and like looking at ventures of totally different things. But he was always looking to become better. I think that's my main mantra. You can't really see it there, but it says be better. Yeah, I don't know, but for me, it's if I stop having the desire to pursue more. Yeah, it's I think that's like it's such a key concept to wrestle with, of satisfaction and things like that. Like people talk about being content, but I really like Bob Proctor's approach towards it, because I'm going to be thankful. We let's say we go out to dinner. It's like, I'm going to be thankful that we can afford this meal. I'm going to be thankful that we're there together. I'm going to be thankful that the establishment, right? When growing up, when anyone asked me to say grace, one of the things first things I thought to come to mind was, like, Lord, thank you for the food that we're about to eat, the hands that prepared it, and like the ability for all of us to eat it together. But at the same time, it's, well, why wouldn't you want to be able to then acquire more, to be able to feed more? Like, I always think of stuff like that. I love the idea, like, be happy with what you have, but be dissatisfied with it, because dissatisfaction is a creative state. Think of an artist. Look at an artist. It's like they always like the like those die-hard artists. They're always wanting to paint another painting. They're always wanting to sculpt one more thing. Whether something is perfect or not, it's like I always want to create. I think that for me, everything stems down to that, like the act of creation. If I just keep everything as is, it's like, look at nature. Nature never stands still. So it's like movement, movement, movement.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting too because it seems like so many people like I mean now I'm at that age where 29 turning 30 this year and it's kind of the natural progression of find the right person, get married, if you want to have a family. And then I feel like a lot of people just kind of stop and like we were talking about before, get set in their ways of life and routine and career. So how do you break people out of that? Like, and the norm, that's really the norm, right? I mean, I think like to even have a conversation like we're having, we're probably like in the 5% of the population that even are able to think this way and talk and conversate. So for people that are listening, like what advice could we give to them to be able to, maybe they're ahead of where we are in life and they have more success, maybe they're not, maybe they're just starting out. What could we give to allow them to want to better their best and continually grow and not become stagnant, so to speak. I think that's a good word, but to want to be curious, like you were saying before, and continually better
Yeah.
in all aspects of life.
I think the idea of like having an aspect of gratitude of what you currently have. Zig Ziglar was always big on that, where he talked about like this one woman who came to a show and she's like, oh my gosh, like I can't stand my job. It's the worst job in the world. Like I hate everything about it. And his response was, you know what, ma'am, I think they're going to fire you. She's like, what? Oh my God, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, why? And he's like, I don't think there's a building in the world that can hold that much poison. So then he like proceeded and she's like, oh my gosh, blah, blah, blah. So he's like, is there anything you like about your job? Like, let's sit down and make a list. She's like, well, that's easy. I don't like anything about my job. He's like, well, do they pay you? She's like, of course they pay me. He's like, do you like being paid? Yes. Well, you can always be paid more, but are you okay with at least making something? So he just went down this list. Do they provide you with benefits? Like, do you have to work 24 hours a day? No, I do get time. Like, do you get vacation days? Like, it was an aspect of there are things about your current situation that there are to be grateful for. And then from there, it's then for me, it would be, what do you want? Like, okay, you have all of that. Are you grateful for it? Like, this is what we have. And again, that's really difficult in of itself, even for myself, for everyone listening. It's like, that's a hard thing. But then what is it that you want? And then it's like, well, how bad do you want it? I think the big aspect, and I mean, you're in your PT, we're both of our fields, we're prescribing things. Well, I call it the Goldilocks principle. You don't want to prescribe too little, because then you don't really actually make any meaningful change. And you don't want to prescribe too much, because then it's overwhelming. You pull from too many resources. You start like taxing relationships and time and stuff like that. So it's like, just enough. But it's like baby steps. Jordan Peterson mentioned something. He's like, suppose someone is bench pressing or lifting weights and they can bench press, 50 pounds. And they're doing whatever, and a couple weeks later, they can bench press 52 pounds. He's like, well, what is that? He said, it's a small step in a really long journey. It's like such a powerful, profound concept, because Simon Sinek talks all the time. He's like, when you go to the gym, when you go home, you look in the mirror and you can't see that you're any different. So it's like you have to have that. Then you get into like faith, right? Martin Luther King would always say, just because you can't see the entire staircase doesn't mean you shouldn't take the next step. So it's like, thankful for what I have, then indicate what is it that I want to have or want to pursue, and then figure out like, okay, well, what are the steps? Like, what do I have to start doing in order? Always towards forward. The president of I teach at SJU. The president, President McConnell, her big thing is always forward. I'm adding like my own little thing. It's always towards forward. Figure out how to orient yourself and just navigate towards whatever it is that you're pursuing. For me, it's then also reinforcing all that stuff, like Jim's Clear talks about with the systems. You have to set up your physical environment. You have to set up your social environment. Like, make sure people know this is what I'm trying to pursue. A lot of times people will tell you, don't tell anyone. And then the mindset is listen to nothing but positive, songs, watch movies, listen to podcasts, like watch YouTube videos that reinforce you having the power to make a meaningful difference or a meaningful change in your life, right? Enlightened self-interest, as Jim Rohn said. But it has to start, the big takeaway, it has to start within, and no one else can do it for you. So take those small steps. That would be my takeaway or my advice.
I think the what you just said about not telling people about what you're going to do and going and doing it, or I think that's what people usually recommend, versus on the flip side of telling people what you're going to do and going and do it, going and doing it. I think that's good because I think that it's good for one of two things: the person that has integrity, and I think I'm that kind of person where, like, if I say I'm going to do something and people know I said I was going to do it, I feel like a phony, so to speak, if I don't do it. So that would be beneficial for me. But then I feel like other people, it may give them like a false sense of accomplishment before they even do it, right? And it won't kind of lead them to actually doing it because you're talking about it and you're saying, oh, I want to do this, that, and the other thing. And then they never actually lean into it. So just being careful with that. Be careful with who you tell.
Yeah,
people
what's
that
right?
are going to support you, right? Like people that care and that are going to be in your best interest.
Here's where you get over the fear part is, hey, those are two entirely different scenarios. One, but both of them have the same, the consistency of them is I'm either going to tell everyone I can that this is my goal and this is what I'm working towards, or I'm going to tell no one. The prerequisite for both of those scenarios is you have a goal that you're looking to aim at. If you try one, I'm going to tell everyone I know and I fall flat on my face and I don't even start anything and everyone is judging me and everyone's like, haha, look, you didn't even do anything and you bought this and you tried that. Okay. Regroup, get a same goal or a different goal, and then don't tell anyone, or vice versa. Don't tell anyone, and if it doesn't work, then try to tell people. Like, just try something. If it doesn't work out, then try the other, right? Just, it's not that you have to get a new goal. If you try something and it doesn't work out, it doesn't mean you have to get a new goal. Just readjust the path that you're taking towards it.
Yeah, and Jordan Peterson also says, I wrote this down, that a little bit of the poison that kills you is what gives life meaningfulness. So I think that goes back to what you were saying before with the job, with the lady saying that she hates everything about it, and how he was kind of dissecting like little tidbits that are kind of keeping you in that position because of it has some sort of benefit. But I think back to Jordan Peterson's point about poison that kills you or hurts you is what he's saying in that is what gives life meaningfulness, and it's like the challenges in life. It's what makes it worth living. And I feel like the challenges that present themselves are sometimes things that hurt you but make you stronger, and you can adapt and move forward from them. But they're also like little roadblocks and like make you redirect yourself to like go down a different path, which was actually better than like the path that you were on. And that's hard to see in the moment, though. Like you said, you have to have some sort of faith to believe that better things are to come. You always talk about not all storms are come to disrupt your path, but clear your path.
Yeah, man.
So it's the same kind of concept.
But what's the big idea? Yogi Berra says when you come to a fork in the road, take it. You have to take a path. And then Jordan Peterson talks a lot of times. He's like, just try and orient yourself towards whatever you believe is a path towards betterment. There's no this one's better than that one. It's like what I tell students all the time. Guess what? If you want to be a PT, you want to be a chiropractor, you want to be an accountant, if that doesn't end up working out, no big deal. There's all these other professions and careers that you can be doing that are also fulfilled, that also have a lot of friends, that also allow you to drive what you want to drive, eat what you want to eat, live where you want to live, like go where you want to go, like stuff like that. But that, I mean, Jordan is crazy profound, but I think of that poison aspect, and I get two, and we can end shortly after this. I get two takeaways from that. One, that little bit of poison, if you don't have those, and we say poison, but if you don't have those challenges in life, if you're not taking that little bit of poison, proverbially, it's you're very unlikely to appreciate. If you don't eat a sour apple, you're really unlikely to really, truly, genuinely appreciate and enjoy like an unbelievably delicious apple, right? If you go to an apple orchard and you pick an apple off the ground that dropped like 2, 3 days ago, that's going to be the most delicious tasting apple that you've ever had in your life. If you've never eaten another apple but those apples, you won't appreciate that apple as much as someone who's eaten nothing but like dumpster apples, if that makes sense. And then the other aspect from the poison, things like that is, right, like challenge. The only way to grow is to break free of your comfort zone, right? Is to overload your body. Like you look at how do I strengthen my muscle? Well, you have to overload it. You can't adapt if there was no threshold crossed. So I think we might be able to end it here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the last thing would just be like to let people know that the tough times suck. Like there's no way around the suck. And Pat and I have that, like I'm currently going through that to some degree right now, but like to be able to hop on here and talk to Pat and to be able to have a conversation that's meaningful to me, and I hope that I can help someone that's listening, and to just show you that a preview to life that good things will come. It's just a matter of that you have to go through the bad times to really appreciate them. And I think that's something that's hard for like anyone in life to really remind themselves of, that like life is about struggles, and it's the saying you were saying before, it's not about what happens to you, but it's like about how you react to it and like what you do with it. That's like what makes life meaningful and what leads you to being like the best person you can be.
Yeah. I mean, the Buddha's one of the Buddha's main sayings was life is suffering, right? And then the idea of the challenges, it's don't be afraid to shake things up. There's an awesome line by Dr. Seuss, and I'm forgetting it, but it's basically like, the people that matter in your life, what if you shake things up and you're going to try something new, and it's like, hey, I'm going to tax our resources, or I'm going to like tax our time because I have to go do this for myself. He's like, the people that matter will come around. The people that don't come around, guess what? They don't really matter, right? And that's a hard pill to swallow. But that's the only way that you can break free towards like a true better way of being, right? There's along the lines of what you're saying. There's a strength on the other side of a storm that can only be acquired from having gone through it. Like you can't have the strength of withstanding a storm if you didn't try and go through a storm. And life's going to throw you storms. Life's going to throw you curveballs, things like that. The only way to adapt is to assess what's going on. What is it that you want? Reorient yourself. How bad do you want it? All right. I got knocked down, right? Life is not how many times you get knocked down. Life is how many times you get back up. So it's always a pleasure, dude. I look forward to starting this back up again. Obviously we have random themes, but a big one for us has been this long hiatus, and we've been talking. I mean, it's like not a week that goes by, let alone sometimes a couple days where we're not texting like, hey man, hope you're doing well, checking in, got to get back on the podcast, got to just reconnect and converse again, because there's such worthwhile conversations for me. So I appreciate you. I appreciate our conversations, and I hope other people realize that you're not alone. Like, we're in this together. If you have any comments, thoughts, things like that, anything, please, let us know.
Likewise, always a pleasure, Pat. And if you have any comments, don't hesitate to reach out to either of us on our social medias or here on our YouTube or on podcasts directly on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. We'd be happy to get back to you guys and look forward to doing more. Maybe try and do 1 or 2 of these a week. And like we said, doesn't matter how long it is, but as long as we are consistent and getting something up that's of value to people to listen to. So yeah. Hope everyone has a great holiday too, if we don't put another one up by the time of Christmas, or Hanukkah coming up too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if you want some daily motivation, sign up. I'll put in the show notes, patdavitt.com/newsletter. I do a daily inspirational newsletter, nothing but quotes, and there's typically a certain theme. So
yeah, they're awesome. I can attest to that. I get them on a daily basis. So
all right, Tyler, until next time.
Until next time, Pat.
Be well. Thank you for being here and taking a step towards growth. As the saying goes, change is inevitable, but growth is optional. We look forward to sharing more expertise and content with you, and we want to hear from you about what topics you're interested in learning more about. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this experience, please like, subscribe, and share with others who could benefit.
Our goal is to grow the show and bring on more valuable guests to provide relevant content for your life. Thank you for joining us on this mission to spread knowledge and connect with people around the world. The Valued Pursuit podcast and content posted by Valued Pursuit is presented solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from this podcast or website are at the user's own risk. It is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a physician, medical, psychotherapist, or any other qualified professional, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical or mental health condition they may have and should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such condition. You ever have a vision? Something you see play out before it happens? They say that the scariest thing in life is not growing into your potential, not recognizing the person you were created to be. We are on a mission to help everyone on this planet chase that version of you, your most fulfilled self. Created here in the USA, Reinvent Co. is now releasing their one-off hoodie in a full zip design, premium quality fitted to your physique to show you are chasing greatness in all aspects of life. Wear a garment that shows your potential evolving over a lifetime and become a part of a brand where humans connect to knock down the obstacles they face for endless refinement and continuous improvement.